And I can't tell you how excited I am to have these two individuals here. I have had the privilege of working with them each for quite a long period of time, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. You probably know them both already, but let me introduce them. Christiana Figueres served as the head of the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, from 2010 to 2016, and was at the helm for the United Nations at the historic Paris Agreement in this city 10 years ago this year. She's now a founding partner of the nonprofit Global Optimism. And by the way, she's gone through this, she went through this training 18 years ago.
Was it 18 or 180?
Well, 18 years ago in my home city of Nashville, Tennessee. She was already very well informed about the climate crisis and its solutions even back then, but I'm honored that you went through the training, Christiana. Laurence Toubiana served as France's climate change ambassador, which put her in a lead position as a lead architect of the Paris Agreement. She's now president and CEO of the European Climate Foundation. And may I also say, Laurence, to everyone here, France as a nation hosted the Paris. One of the main reasons that it was such a success was not only Christiana at the helm, but the nation of France as a host. I got the impression that maybe France has had some experience with diplomacy because they played every nation in the world one-on-one, as we would say in sports, for years ahead of the conference. It was really masterfully done. So these two individuals, it's really a great privilege to have both of you here. I can't imagine two people better, but thank you both for coming. I'll start with a question for both of you, and then I'll frame some for each of you individually. The Paris Agreement, as everyone knows, was truly historic in bringing together nations of the world. And one of the last slides I showed you all before lunch listed all of the countries that had signed up at Paris to the net zero commitment. 87% of all the world's emissions comes from countries that are now committed to net zero because of the Paris negotiation. And in spite of the backsliding and the pushback from the fossil fuel polluters, still those commitments are there for the most part. It was a notable feat. But how would you I'll go with you first, Christiana, and then you, Laurence. How would you both characterize the current state of climate action?
First of all, on behalf of my dear sister and myself, can we thank you, Al? Because honestly, who was always there every moment of the morning of the day, 2 o'clock in the morning, helping us out? Al Gore. Oh my God. Thank you so much.
Very kind.
And also, Al, so thank you so much that you're not giving up on this training. You are going around the world and around the world and around the world, and you continue to bring more and more young and not so young people into climate awareness and the climate training. So thank you so much for continuing to do a job that we have to continue to do. The Paris effect. I've seen quite a bit of literature that identifies the effect on the economy after the Paris Agreement as the Paris effect. And from my perspective, I always think of it as though we have two curves that are competing against each other, and both curves are actually on an exponential trajectory. The first exponential trajectory of the first curve is the damages the impacts, the escalating frequency and intensity of everything that you so well explained in your slide deck. And the fact that there's more scientific certainty and that we're getting horrendously close to closing the window on 1.5. That is one escalating curve of the damages and the threats. The other escalating exponential curve is the curve of solutions. And so the fact that we already have almost 2 times as much investment into clean technologies and energies than in fossil fuels. The fact that just last year, renewables went down 35% just in 1 year. The fact that EV batteries went down 20% in cost, on and on and on and on. So you have an exponential curve of solutions and an exponential curve of threats. And the question, of course, always is, where are they going to intersect? And which one of them is ultimately going to be the one that determines the future? We know which one we want. And the fact that we have that exponential curve of solutions is very much the result of the Paris effect, because that's when the gate was opened into the race of clean technology with investments and with more and more technologies that continue to improve. But we're still far behind the curve. We have not intersected the first curve yet. So obviously, it is not a question of the direction of travel. It is a question of speed and scale.
Well said, well put. Laurence, same question. What is the current state of climate action in your view?
Just to say first that I think you didn't meet me, but I met you in Kyoto in 1997. I was a climate diplomat beginner at that time.
When I was vice president, yeah.
When you were vice president. So I remember, so that's a long fight you have been really steering. So again, that there is a pre-Paris and after Paris in the mindset, and not only on the business, on the investors, on the governments, of the international institutions, but as well on the consciousness of people. There is a really recent poll covering 180 countries, and you see that 89% of people in this number of countries, meaning all the globe mostly, representing most 90% of the emission, think that we should do more climate action. What does it mean? That people understand what is happening, are conscious of that, and are asking the government to do more. So this has changed. In every country, people are aware, concerned. Of course, there are a priority, cost of living, how to have a decent house and jobs, etc. But at the same time, people are now understanding. And you know, for me, the major change of Paris, yes, the business, electric vehicle, certainly when we were, bracing each other with Christiana on the December 12, we could not imagine how fast the technology would go. The renewable energy, the electric vehicle, it was just a very future. But what is, for me, the more important thing is the citizen involvement and agency. And you know, there is something after Paris. I was so happy to see so many years when the Friday for Future, all the youth movement was really walking in the street in so many countries and saying, government, you have to respect what you have committed to. And that is a Paris Agreement objective, the 1.5, everything. You can't just turn your back about what you have decided collectively and globally. So that's, in a way, there is a business case, there is what is evolving in the economy, the direction of travel, China, India, in so many countries, Brazil, looking to the green direction, but that the force will be the citizen, in my view, and that's a post-Paris agreement as well.
What would you say, each of you, I'll start with you this time, and then to you, Christiana, and Christiana, you went through a training years ago like this. What would you say to these individuals who have decided to spend 3 days of their lives here learning about this, the causes, the solutions, and networking, and how to bring about change? What advice would each of you have for these individuals and the other 10,000 that are in the satellite locations around the world when they complete this 3-day event and go back to their home communities? What advice would each of you give to them?
You are the hope You are really the hope. When you see what some government has decided to do, in particular one of the major emitters at world level, to go back, to backtrack, to even consider that everything is a hoax. The hope, you are the hope. We have to stand up. And you know, it's good when we are not a young lady. I'm not a young lady. I could be your grandmother for most of you. And you know, we have to stand up. We have to resist this wave of denial of this powerful empire of fossil fuels supported by crazy people, if I may say so.
You can say his name if you want to. But there's more than one, unfortunately.
You know, the one who takes too much ketamine in the morning and maybe something else. So this is what I think, you know, we know it's difficult. We know we are really in a very difficult situation everywhere. Democracy, shrinking space of civil society. But at the same time, as Christiana said, this is a direction of travel. Anyway, that will go there. It is the future of the economy. Anyway, the way we can survive on this planet. So believe in yourself. You will make the change because you will be informed. You will respond to the people that are in denial that you have the facts, you have the data, you know how to do that. It's a good thing for business, for jobs, and for protecting the nature. And connecting all these elements because you have dedicated to be the champion of that. So I would say, but just keep the news between you because you will need to connect to each other and to give this force to, again, the resistance we have to face today. And I'm very worried about what is happening at global level. We need to defend democracy at the same time. I don't think that we can fight really seriously against climate change, protecting biodiversity, our ecosystem, which allow our resilience, if we don't have a democratic setting and rule of law. So you have to fight for that as well.
Now, before turning to you, Christiana, I want to add to this that I've said frequently for many years now, in order to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to address the democracy crisis. We have had tectonic, revolutionary changes in the technologies that we use to communicate with one another. And when we had the printing press, it fostered collective decision-making in a particular way. It encouraged reflective thought and a read-write culture. And now we've gone through broadcasting with radio and television and the internet, and now social media with these algorithms that take you down the rabbit holes. They are abusive and predatory, and at the bottom of the rabbit hole, that's where the echo chamber is. And long enough in the echo chamber, you suffer from another kind of AI, not artificial intelligence, artificial insanity, which is where climate denial and democracy denial come from. So I fully agree with you. The challenge is also to protect and defend and revitalize democracy as part of the effort to solve the climate crisis. And you know what I believe? I think that the climate crisis may be one of the principal means by which we find our collective voice in reestablishing the right of the people in every country to determine their own future. But Christiana, what would you, by way of advice to these women and men who are going through this experience now, when they get back to their communities, what advice would you have for them?
Well, first, Al, I have two daughters who are in their mid-30s, and they taught me before they were 10 never to give advice. So this is
Naima and
Jihana, yes, I do not
I was
give
with
advice.
them. I was with them cheering the
Yes, you
dais
were.
when you all completed the
Yes.
Paris Agreement. And my second movie, they're both there cheering and waving their arms
Yes,
for their
my-
mama.
They were so thrilled to be with you. Thank you so much for that. So not in the tone of advice, but rather one of the principles that I learned a long time ago from one of my mentors is encapsulated in the phrase, go to the other side. And what we mean by that is The challenge that each of us faces when we are completely convinced and aware, in this case, for example, about the climate threat and our responsibility to stand up to it. The challenge is when we speak to other people, and once you finish this training, you will go out and one of your purposes is to go and speak to people. How do you do that in a way that is not preachy? How do you do that in a way that doesn't have climate change tattooed on your forehead? How do you do that so that you can go to a dinner party and not be shown to the door immediately? And by going to the other side, what we mean is put yourselves in the shoes of the person or the audience that you're speaking to. And try to understand what is important to that person, to that audience, if you're going to be doing public speaking, which this course trains you so well to do. If it's business people, you can make many arguments that are finance and economy strong. Forget about, or at least at the end, put morality. That is not the argument that you want to start with. If you're talking to, I don't know, around a kitchen table to families, you introduce your concerns by understanding what is that family dealing with, what is important to them. If you're talking to, I don't know, spiritually minded people, you do lead with the morality. My point is, you have to go to the other side, understand what is important to the person or the audience that you're speaking to, and start there. Don't start from a preachy podium because you turn people off. And we can't afford to turn anybody off. The whole point is to bring people, more and more people with us, because this has to be an all hands on deck operation. So for me, that it is constantly a challenge, because of course my immediate intuition is to pull out my sword and go like, okay, which head am I going to chop? and that's maybe not the best entry into a conversation. So going to the other side, understanding what is important, and starting the conversation there. And in fact, here's a challenge for all of you. See if you can have a 10-minute conversation without saying the word climate change. Because the fact is, climate change is so much a part of human and non-human life that you have a lot of material to have an engaging conversation or an engaging speech without saying the word climate change, but really understanding what is important to that person. Get into their shoes first, and then slowly, poco a poco, you bring them to the other side, because then you have built a bridge. Then you have gone to the other side, built the bridge, and brought them back to where you are.
Well said.
Sometimes it's frustrating. Of course, Christiana is right. Sometimes it's frustrating, so you have to have a punching ball somewhere so you can really discharge why are they not understanding. But absolutely, you have to have empathy first to understand why people are not concerned or could be concerned.
So I was unsparing in my description of the role being played by the fossil fuel industry in this ongoing struggle to change policies. And I think all three of us, to one degree or another, have tried to work with them.
Yes.
And to try to convince them to be a part of the solutions. I think we've all had a similar experience in coming to a point where it became clear that they were maybe pretending to be on our side, but not really, or maybe they were, they suffered pushback from their shareholders, or I don't want to spend too much time on this industry, but I have seen in my work that everywhere in the world where there's a new law proposed that would help us move the dial, their lobbyists are there pushing back as hard as they can. And really, they're kind of the main obstacle, in my view. But how do we deal with their very powerful and pervasive influence? And Lawrence, you want to start with this, and then Christiana?
Christiana has done a lot on that. I'm sure it will be important to track your...
Maybe I should go to Christiana first, then.
Because I think, Christiana, you started very early to try to do that. And
I did. I exercised, honestly, you know, amazing patience with them, and then I finally just gave up because they don't want to change, right? They just don't want to change, and
You really tried hard.
I really did.
yeah,
I really did.
I can testify. She really
and,
tried hard.
and then I think the Russian invasion in Ukraine just completely turned them over. But actually, the moment has come in this conversation to turn the tables and ask you a question. Here is my question. I'm getting ready for the question, okay?
I can tell.
How can you explain to us the fact that in the United States, in the craziness, insane asylum that we have in the United States, how is it possible that no one is picking up on the fingerprints of the oil and gas industry in that insanity? How is it possible that it is they who originally financed this campaign, they who are being benefited by many of the measures, not all, because some are going to someone else who begins with M, but many of the measures that are being put in place are benefiting directly the oil and gas industry? Why are we not holding them accountable? Because my sense is that the insanity is so completely inane that it is a house of cards that is going to fall eventually. I don't know when. I don't know if it's going to take a whole 4 years. I hope not. But my wish, honestly, is that when that political house of cards falls, that the oil and gas industry fall with it. If we do not hold them accountable for their fingerprints on this insanity, the political house of cards is going to fall, and they still stay there. Explain that to me.
I'm not sure I can, but I'll do my best to try. I think
take notes?
Yeah, I think that the role of money in politics has changed fairly dramatically, especially in the United States. It is connected in some ways, this is just my theory, that it is connected in some way to this change in the information ecosystem, the way in which we communicate. The ability to buy the consent of the governed, the ability to purchase public opinion with television ads and now videos on the internet and algorithms that trick people into buying propaganda. And they have money, a lot of it, and the forces of democracy struggle to raise enough money to get the message out. I think that's part of it. And we had a Supreme Court decision. I haven't always agreed with the decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court, but we had a decision called Citizens United that actually makes it legal in the U.S. for corporations to give unlimited amounts of money in secret to candidates. If you were going to come up with a plan to undermine democracy, that would be a good way to do it. And I think that is a big part of the reason. But I think there's another reason too, because I think that the victory of Donald Trump, who I was thinking of earlier, you were thinking of someone else, but I think his victory in the election last year came in part also because of a perception that governments prior to his had failed in important ways. Before Trump was elected in the U.S., most mainstream leaders in Europe and Asia, all around the world, have been losing elections because of a generalized feeling that democracies were not working as well as they should in behalf of the people. And I think to understand why that happened, you have to at least mention the role of globalization and the technology revolution. When China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, then you had a massive redistribution of many high-wage jobs from developed countries to lower-wage venues. And in my country, for 50 years, the average middle-income family has not had an inflation-adjusted increase in take-home pay. And they have celebrated, many of us have celebrated the advance of women, the advance of racial minorities, the elimination of discrimination on gender and sexual orientation and so forth. But while these advances were celebrated, the middle-income families, many having lost higher wage jobs, struggling to pay their bills, when people say we have to defend democracy, some of them, without necessarily saying out loud, well, what's in it for me? And I think that there has been, in the wake of globalization and simultaneously the wake of this multi-strand technology revolution, changing the nature of work and the location of work, I think that it has dispirited, that it has diminished the confidence many people have in democracy, democracy's ability to do what they want to see done. And so I think part of the election result in the US last year, and in many of the other countries where the mainstream parties have lost, has been, we're done with you. You've tried. We don't think you've done a good enough job. We're just going to try something radically new. And of course, there were deceptive promises. I mean, Donald Trump deceived the American people into believing that this Project 25, a very elaborate, highly detailed plan that we now see being put into effect, he said, it has nothing to do with me. I never read it. It has nothing to do with me. It's not going to happen. Well, of course, now we see almost every part of it is being put into effect. So that's the best I can do. But I think that we have a chance to revitalize democracy. Every nation makes better decisions when there is a diversity of viewpoints and when all parts of that nation can contribute to the national dialogue that shapes the policies that are adopted. That hasn't been happening. And I think that's one of the reasons for frustration.
I agree with that, but the fossil fuel industry has been riding that wave.
Yes.
And no one is reporting on that. That is the question. Why are we not uncovering the fact that the fossil fuel industry is taking advantage of exactly the political diagnosis that you just made? Because their fingerprints are on that.
But you know, Christiana, I think because we are, for different reasons, we don't dare to call the things like they are. So you don't use the same word. Look, we talk, and there was a wonderful declaration in G20 on disinformation. Really look what is happening in US and elsewhere, in Germany, in France. It's propaganda. Propaganda against migrants. It's propaganda. It's you should not read that. These people are not good enough. It resonates very much, even the words that we have seen, unfortunately, in Europe in the 1930s. So we should call them. Yes, this is money in politics. And in a way, to come back to your first question, we have to take away this enormous influence of money in election. It's really a dramatic element. You can't have a democracy when you have all this money thrown away. And that was a drama for US. You're totally right, the feeling of people, the sentiment not to be recognized, certainly. But this enormous amount of, and the paradox is these people that are funding so-called populist movement to take care of the middle-income household or even the poorest people, they are the one accumulating a wealth that is totally, I don't know the word in English, indecent. It's really, imagine, since the invasion of Ukraine, I think the concentration of wealth, even in Europe, where there were so many, layers of transfer, it has been incredible. So this paradox that the ones who are putting the money, telling people we represent you, and at the same time capture all the wealth from these people themselves. And it is really a shame. And that's the thing we should be not only saying, but shouting.
The third factor I should have mentioned along with globalization and the technology revolutions is the rise in the inequality of income with the concentration of wealth at the top, which really causes a lot of anger and frustration. But I also want to say that there's a well-known law of physics that we all learned in school. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And I want to defend some of the alternative media that are now rising in their audience size and their purchase and public opinion that are telling the story about the fossil. Not broadly enough yet, but it is coming. We are seeing in the United States the biggest upsurge of grassroots political activism by people who want the positive change that I've ever seen in my entire lifetime in the United States. I think that I don't want to be pushing what our friend Gus Speth calls hopium, false hope, or what my children sometimes call toxic positivity. I want legitimate hope. And I do think that it is there. I see it building. And I think that sometimes the positive changes aren't as visible in the early stages. When the printing press first started 500 years ago and it was brought to Paris, it was called the work of the devil. There was great resistance. And it was 150 years before the first scientific treatise was actually put into print. And the early days of this internet social media revolution are very harmful and messy. But slowly we are, I hope, and I do believe, seeing the emergence of effective countermeasures that I have great optimism about.
And we have to understand that, just an anecdote, I had a discussion with one of the CEO of one of the biggest company at what level of oil, and she told me, Laurence, climate change for me is such a problem. Sometimes it prevents me to sleep at night. And then he said, but what can I do?
Oh, yeah.
People want my oil. People want that. And I think we should tell them, you are lying. No, you are lying. Just say that. And the license to operate is just we don't say, you are lying. Even calling now the Gulf of America, I understand now.
A lot of us still call it the Gulf of Mexico. But I want to turn a question around to you. You did that to me, Christiana. Your blog, which is so popular, called Outrage and Optimism. We've heard the outrage and a little bit of the optimism, but I want to ask you, and then you, Laurence, what is the source of your optimism? You talked about the renewable energy curves and all of that. That's evidence. What is the legitimate basis for real optimism that you two would offer?
I think I'm seeing a coincidence of many factors, actually, that none of them individually is going to take us forward, but all of them together is definitely. So one is the irreversibility, obviously, of technology, that we are decarbonizing the global economy, and that is not privy to political cycles, I think is definite. Just because of the strength of the competitiveness and the superiority of technologies. So that, I think, is definitely has to be put on the table. Secondly, I would very much agree with you that we're beginning to see a surge of bottom-up grassroots movements, more and more people who really understand what is going on. And parenthesis, we should be at 3% of each population of every city, of every country, of the world that is actually active on these issues, because history shows us that when 3.5% of the population is active on any issue, political change happens. So we're on the way to that, not there yet, but showing good progress. I'm also very excited about climate litigation. Very excited about climate litigation. There are more than 2,000 cases already, most of them in the United States, but there are cases against companies, against cities, against national governments, And I'm really excited about the fact that we are collectively building the body of jurisprudence that we have been lacking just because this is a new topic. And whether it is at the International Court of Justice or whether it is at a very low-level domestic court in any country, but all the way through, we have more and more cases of climate litigation that are really going to give us the legal basis to act and to hold accountable. So for me, those three are very exciting. That's not the end of the list, but they're my top three that I'm actually excited about, and especially if you understand that they actually interconnect and support each other.
Good, good. Lawrence?
Well, first, I think this orientation of the economy and redistribution of wealth and work at global level started even before the Paris Agreement. In January 2010, the Bureau Politique of China decided to go to the Green Revolution because they were thinking it was just few days after Copenhagen meeting, which we consider was not a big success finally, or even a failure for some. And then they decided that even if the whole press of the world say you are not delivering they were saying this is a direction. We will construct a market, our economy to go in the green direction. Electric vehicle, batteries, solar panel, etc. And they did that and that's why they are so competitive now. So that meaning that the long-term view is this one. I think the second element is now, unfortunately, the cost of climate change can't be ignored. The numbers are there, no? We are talking sometimes about 2% of the GDP of India last year. The insurance companies are putting the numbers, and they are now, and it's interesting, losing as much money when they have to pay for the damages than they are earning when they invest in fossil fuel. Last year, it was exactly the same amount. They lost money on one side. At the same time, they were contributing through their portfolios or investment on the other side. So that's the perception of the cost, which in Paris was there, but it was for tomorrow. Now it's today. And the third is, you know, my foundation goes in many countries, and I have an incredible example. In Poland, just to take a country that is reputation in Europe is, you know, the one who are polluting, don't want to do really serious action. Firefighters in the small region of Poland decided they were anxious about the fires, and they decided to organize a community, the grandmothers, the people working in libraries, in cafes, to say we have to ask the government to do something because of the perception we have of the risk for the whole community. Second example, still in Poland, election. You know, you have a populist party, very right-wing, very controlling, and people were looking, what can we finally get them out? And of course, everybody was saying it's not possible. And then the women movement, together with the climate movement, joined forces and said, it's the same battle. We want the rule of law, we want the judiciary free, and so we have to battle together. And you know, so much examples. That's why today, and because of what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic, we need to join the different people who are doing the different things for different reasons, the people who are working for this ecosystem to fight against that particular problem, the women's right or the children care, whatever. We need to join forces, and that's my hope. We can do that. And that the power, you know, as you said, the popular movement is the movement that have always brought the change in all countries. And I see now people walking, marching in Hungary. It's not easy to march in Hungary, or Serbia, or Slovakia,
or Turkey
now. And so this is a strength, this is a hope. And I think if we are clever enough, again, to see what we can do together, the other one, help each other on media, on information, of connection, of protection. I think we can do so much. And that's the moment, in my view.
I love both of your answers. And people are marching now in the U.S. as well. I have to say, in the town hall meetings that a lot of congressmen are having now, the crowds are far larger than ever in the past. People are very angry, and many of those who voted for Donald Trump are now saying, well,
Furious. They're furious.
I didn't intend to vote for this. This is crazy. And on the subject of despair, Nelson Mandela famously said, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I think that is true of our situation today. We have a lot going for us. And I want to say one other thing. We now sometimes hear this odd word, polycrisis, P-O-L-Y-C-R-I-S-I-S, polycrisis, meaning that you have the climate crisis, the extinction crisis, the oceans are in crisis, the forests are in crisis. You could go through the list, and they're putting them all together and say it's a polycrisis. I think we have a poly solution. Mm-hmm. And the poly solution is to rapidly phase out the dependence on fossil fuels, because it is causing it is a major contributor to most all of these crises. And I like, Lawrence, what you said about all of them finding that it's the same underlying cause. And I like your stubborn optimism, Christiana.
Which part do you like, the stubbornness or the optimism?
I like the combination, because you are optimistic, and when people try to shake you away from that, you're stubborn and you won't let them do it. So I'm very grateful to both of you. Before we close, I started off by asking you for what advice you would give these individuals here. If you had one thing that you could say to the world as a whole about what we're facing and what we should do now, maybe it's unfair to put this question to you, but I'm going to do it because I want to know the answer. If you could say one thing to the whole world about this challenge, what would you say? Lawrence, you start, and then we'll conclude with you, Christiana.
I would say, don't be afraid. The fear, there is a famous book done on a famous writer in US, and the fear is the things that undermine us. So we should
say that again.
Fear. We should not be afraid. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, we started too late. We should have had the Paris Agreement 10 years before, or even 20 years before, because we knew. But I think if we are afraid, if it's too late, if we are fatalist, if we are not stubborn optimists, that's really just create anxiety. So fear is not the solution. So I would say, don't be afraid. There is a wonderful quote of Victor Hugo who say, we should surprise a catastrophe by the little fear it inspires us. So that's my word.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I love that comment. Thank you. Christiana, bring us home.
Well, for me it is, how do we both stay in the present and address the challenges, the fear, the despair, the anger, all of that is in the present, but also at the same time, take the long view and understand that we are a moment in the arc of history, that we are on the right side of history. We are going to address this. It will continue to be difficult. Don't think that we're eventually going to make it easy. It will continue to be difficult, and we shall overcome despite that.
Thank you very much. And at a time of potential despair in the U.S. civil rights movement, Martin Luther King said, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but keep moving. And all of the great morally based movements in world history have encountered periods of potential despair. And the real advocates sometimes succumb to it, but they kept going anyway, and recruiting others. And that's what we're doing here. And I would like to conclude by saying to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, we have two heroic champions of the world's future and solutions to the climate crisis here. Please join me in thanking Christiana and Laurence. Thank you very much.
And Al.